I then looked at property rights, inheritance rights, divorce rights. What's yours is yours, what's his is half of yours. Yeah, brilliant. Much of it could have been written by a Californian lawyer. In fact, this is from where they probably get their inspiration. All these tales in the tabloids about the superstars having prenuptial contracts and teams of lawyers drawing up and thrashing out these prenuptial contracts, they were available to Muslim women from day one. And so I began to see Islam in a totally different light. And I thought, yes, okay, this is great, but what are the people like? And so I went out into the Muslim communities, specifically to meet the sisters. And it didn't matter where I went in the world, whether it was Pakistan, or whether it was Saudi, or Canada, or America, or Australia, and now New Zealand. The Muslim women I have met, whether they have been formally educated or not, are resilient, strong, politicized, internationally aware, multi-skilled, multi-talented. A few years ago, I would have looked in this room and picked out everyone wearing a hijab, and I would have thought, oh, look at those poor, oppressed women. How did they manage to sneak out of the home to come here? Now I'm looking and I'm trying to work out who is the engineer, who is the doctor, who is the lawyer, who is the teacher, who is doing the PhD, who's doing the MA, who's raising kids at the same time, supporting their man, running a business, a charity, who is the backbone of the community. I see incredibly diverse women. And I remember a sister in Canada who said to me, Yvonne, my head might be covered, but my mind is not. And the most valuable lesson that I learned from the sisters that I met is never ever again will I judge a person's freedoms and liberties by the length of their skirt. So this was wonderful. The other thing that I learned about the Muslim community is it has an incredibly gossipy network. The communication is amazing, but sometimes there were Chinese whispers and people had false information that I had taken my Shahada, the oath to become a Muslim. And I remember one day, I'm sure many of you in this hall will have at least heard the name. One day I got a phone call from Sheikh Abu Hamza al-Masri, the fire and brimstone cleric from Finsbury Park Mosque, who is currently detained at Her Majesty's pleasure in Belmarsh. And he rang me up and he said, Sister Yvonne, welcome to Islam. And I said, well, thank you very much. However, I hate to disappoint you, but you're a wee bit premature. I haven't taken my Shahada yet, but, you know, I will get there, inshallah. And he said, well, take your time. This is going to be the most important decision you ever make in your life. Don't be rushed into it. Don't be pressurized into it. Make sure that you read as much as you can. Be convinced before you take your Shahada. We are all making dua, prayer for you. And I thought, I can't believe that this is the fire and brimstone cleric from Finsbury Park Mosque. The tabloids love to hate him because of his hooks and his eye patch, and they really have demonized him. And I said, well, thank you very much for your understanding. I will keep you informed with my progress. And I was just about to close the line when he said, well, there's just one thing I want you to know. And I said, well, what's that? He said, well, if you go out tomorrow and you're hit by a bus, you will go straight to hellfire. I said, thank you, and closed the line. And that made me nervous. It made me very nervous. So I took a copy of the Shahada and I carried it round with me. And I would address meetings like this, and I would say, look, if you come across an accident and you hear someone shouting for 2 Muslim witnesses, please come running fast because it's me trying to get in before it's too late. Happily, there was no such accident. And on June the 30th, in 2003, at 11:30 in the morning, I took my Shahada and declared my belief that there is only one God and that Muhammad, peace be upon him, is his messenger. And I joined then what I consider to be the biggest and the best family in the world. And I know that wherever I go in the world, it doesn't matter how remote the place is, I will meet brothers and sisters who will give me their love and support and help if I need it. And that is very important to me. I was also lucky enough in January this year to go on Hajj, the annual pilgrimage which Muslims are required to do at least once in their life. As I say, the Saudi women, these women are really, really remarkable, and as I say, they're in the wings and they're ready to launch. Unfortunately, because of Saudi's restrictive media rules, we hardly get to find out any real news that is happening there. But these sisters from Jeddah told me how distressed they were during the second Intifada, the uprising in Palestine, how distressed they were, and they had been discussing this in the mosque after Friday prayers. And they wanted to show their solidarity with their Palestinian sisters. So they did something that is forbidden in Saudi. They had a spontaneous demonstration. And they shouted and demonstrated, and the police were called because of this public disorder. And the police moved in, and one of the main women stood in front of the police and she said, "Dare one of you touch us? We are Saudi women and you cannot touch us." And the police sprang back, and they were wondering, what on earth are we going to do with these women? We can't have them demonstrating. But they're right, we can't manhandle them and cart them off to jail either. And there was this standoff for about half an hour as the women continued with their protest. In the end, the police chief had a better idea, and they went and arrested all their husbands instead. They took them to the station, and they said the next time their wives did this, they would be charged. Which is a wonderful tale. So that was Hajj in January. Obviously, you're all aware of the London bombings. I live in central London. We were shocked by the ferocity of the atrocity, but not surprised. The anti-war movement and the political party I belong to, called Respect, which is led by George Galloway MP, had said, long before the first bombs dropped on Baghdad, we told Tony Blair, if you take us into a war with Iraq, our security will vanish. London will become a target. In his arrogance, he dismissed us. He dismissed the fears of 2 million people who marched in London. He would rather take his orders from Washington. Really, I salute New Zealand in its strength and determination to stand up to America over many different issues. That stand it should be me applauding you. That stand has made New Zealand one of the safest places on earth in terms of security, and certainly your anti-nuclear stance is admirable. Beware of siren calls from politicians like Winston Peters, who thrive only on hate. You have a very important election coming up soon. I can't tell you how to vote, but just be wary of those who would want to stand shoulder to shoulder with George Bush, because you will end up in serious trouble like we have in Britain. Thank you very much for listening to me. I am really looking forward to hearing your questions and observations. As I say to the non-Muslims here tonight, I am not Islam's answer to Billy Graham. I am not here to get you to convert. But if you are interested in learning a little bit more about Islam for your own benefit, not for any other reason, there's some books outside which you're welcome to take away. Thank you very much for being a terrific audience. Thank you. Assalamu alaikum.
يا قوم إن تتعجبوا إني لمنهم أعجب.
And 100,000 innocent civilians have been slaughtered by George Bush and Tony Blair's bombs since the start of the war. I was speaking to a Sheikh Majid al-Ghaud in Fallujah a few weeks ago, and he said that their estimates are that the figure is nearer 500,000. The reality is that the Taliban were no more brutal than the previous regime, and certainly this regime leaves a lot to be desired. For instance, the prison where I was held, I returned, I've been back to Afghanistan 4 or 5 times, and I went to it, and it is jammed with young girls aged 12 to 16 whose only crime is that they've run away from home because they don't want to be sold off as child brides, a practice that the Taliban had stamped out. The only success story in Afghanistan at the moment is the production of opium, which has made Afghanistan the #1 heroin producer in the world. The city where I was held, Jalalabad, now has hardcore porn for sale in DVDs in the front windows. These are, I live in Soho, London's red light district, and I can tell you now, these DVDs wouldn't even be sold under the counter in Soho, but they're in the front windows in Afghanistan. What we have given the Afghan people is drugs and porn, and I'm no doubt sure they've got the rock and roll as well. Hamid Karzai is laughingly called the mayor of Kabul because he's lost control of his country outside of the capital, and the Taliban are coming back. They're in control in certain provinces in Afghanistan, and I can tell you something else. When I have travelled around Afghanistan, quite a few people, including the women, have said we wish they were back. So don't for one moment think that Afghanistan is a success story. It's an absolute nightmare disaster where 20,000 American soldiers are committing war crimes on a weekly basis, and innocents are still being slaughtered in that country. It's very easy to spot a terrorist. There were 8 of them in Scotland the other week at the G8. One of them lives in the White House, another one lives in Downing Street. And the biggest terrorist, the biggest war criminal is in Israel. He's called Ariel Sharon.